think it's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. And not just because my 15-year-old son announced to me the other day he wants to be a grease monkey with a PhD. So what better place to work? When you graduate from college, you think you know it all. You think you're ready for everything. And lo and behold, everything's sort of fuzzy and not quite the way we thought it was. So education doesn't stop when you get your sheepskin. You have to keep coming back on a regular basis and refreshing what you know and what you don't know to adapt to a rapidly changing world. There's an organization called the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. They do an awful lot of work in innovation. And in February of this year, they gave a presentation in Washington, which was on the state of the nation in terms of innovation. One of the speakers there was the governor of Nebraska, and he said, it's critical in America to understand that innovation is not just for 20-somethings, it's for 30-somethings and some 40-somethings. Well, I restrained myself and I didn't jump up and go for his throat and say, what about 50-somethings, 60-somethings, 70-somethings? Just because we have gray hair or no hair doesn't mean our brains have begun to rot. What's made this country strong is the practical experience that we've all developed. That's what's keeping us competitive. With over 50% of the technology graduate students in this country right now being foreign nationals, the U.S. must work more aggressively to take what us old fogies know and transfer it to younger generations, or we're going to be in big trouble. Now, innovation is totally meaningless work. Last time I looked, there were over 115 million citations on Google, and that's like professional strength, large economy size. Justice Potter Stewart was pretty succinct a number of years ago. He was talking about obscenity, but it still holds. I cannot define it, but I know it when I see it. So innovation has many definitions. It can be the act of introducing something new. It can be idea, method, device, exploitation of new ideas. It's just a whole range of things. Innovation is just moving the ball closer to the finish line. What's the finish line? It can be financial, it can be organizational, it can be almost anything which you feel is improving the quality of your life. And at the same time, we can improve our environment and food and everything else, and that's even better. So I look at it really as the last one, that innovation is a solution to a new solution to an old problem, or an old solution to a new problem, or anywhere in between. And people often get confused between innovation and invention, because invention is a little different. Innovation, if you'll forgive the analogy, the world is a giant jigsaw puzzle. Every year we pick up new pieces of the puzzle and we do our best to remember them. And then as you get older, in the absence of getting Alzheimer's or getting elected to Congress, you become more and more facile at being able to innovate, figuring out how you put pieces together to solve your problem. Invention is, okay, I must have lost a piece. By looking at the pieces that are around it, what would that piece have to look like? So you can be a fabulous innovator and a terrible inventor, or vice versa. There are two distinct areas of innovation, the products and the processes. And they really are very different. We unfortunately teach far too much in the school system on innovation as a product. But the processes are even more important, because processes generate cash a whole lot more quickly. As an example, any of you who've had kids who have suffered through the slings and arrows of the drive-through line at McDonald's. When my kids were younger, I learned more about fighting, warfare, turf issues than I cared to, because you pull up first to the menu, and that's where you place the order. Now, you can't have the Happy Meal today. You had it last time. You have to eat the cheeseburger. Well, McDonald's finally realized that that was the slow part of the whole drive-through line situation. So they worked with a little company in Pittsburgh to develop a TV camera, which is approaching commercialization, that identifies what kind of car you were driving, whether it's an SUV or a sports car, and how many people are in it, and roughly how big they are. So if an open-top sports car and there's one person, they're probably going to want something like the giant triple burger, which will likely range with cholesterol. And if one big person, a bunch of little ones, then it's probably a parent and children. So they start pre-staging the things will be common to anything they are likely to order. The last numbers I saw, they're getting almost a 50% speed up in throughput with the drive-through line by that simple expedient. And again, why didn't anybody think of that before? There are zillions and zillions of things out there that we should have thought of years ago, but we didn't. And that's why what Paul and the people here are doing is so extraordinarily valuable, because we're seeing the history that got us to where we are now. And that helps that got us to where we're going to go next. Innovation comes from three sources: a need, dissatisfaction, or curiosity. And if, oh, by the way, you have teenage children, which I do, want and need get sort of blurred together. The day my youngest daughter told me, I need these new sneakers or I'll die otherwise. Need is something that you gotta have to stay alive. Food, protection. Curiosity, nature's leaving all kinds of great things for us to look at if we're just smart enough to see, gee, that's sort of interesting, I wonder why. The biggest opportunities are in the section called dissatisfaction. My wife is a coffee addict. If she could walk up and down the hall dragging an IV stand behind her and have the coffee drip directly into her veins, she'd be absolutely thrilled. And she and our daughters are all constantly complaining about how if you drink coffee from a travel mug, it tastes terrible. Being good American consumers, we have bought every conceivable kind of travel mug. Plastic, stainless steel, ceramic, and none of them work. But in retrospect, it's obvious why none of them work. The lid that is keeping the coffee from spilling on you is keeping the aroma from getting to your nose. So it's the equivalent of drinking coffee when you have a bad cold and a clothespin over your nose. It became very simple then to design a whole new genre of coffee cups with holes in it and a special membrane that passes the vapor. And that's working out beautifully. Two major coffee vendors have now licensed the technology and we're bringing it out. But what makes it even more fun is once we looked at what is the underlying principle of this, it's a controlled vapor delivery system. So the same coffee mug which we're selling for $3.50, if you put a calming vapor in and you blow the aroma across somebody who is inside an MRI machine, it calms them down. Our hospital is testing this out right now, has estimated they'll be able to get between 2 and 3 additional patients through each MRI each day at $2,000 a pop. So $3.50 coffee mug put over here is saving, has the potential to save over $1 million per year per MRI machine. It's all a question of if you don't hear about the problem, you don't know how to solve it. A good friend of mine is a commercial real estate developer in Delaware, and he bought this huge building, loaded himself down with enough debt to sink a battleship. 2 weeks after he got there, his biggest tenant that had more than half the building said, we are not happy with this building. Your elevators are too slow. Replace the elevators or we're not renewing our lease. If that had happened, he would have been bankrupt in a heartbeat. So he called me and he said, what am I going to do? I'm stuck. After a while, we realized the problem was not that the elevators were slow. It was that the tenants in the building had nothing else to do while waiting for the elevator. So we hired a crew, and that weekend, they took down wallpaper in all the elevator lobbies and put up floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Within another week, he started getting letters of commendation from his tenants saying, well, we have no idea how you did this. Within a week, you replaced the elevators, we saw no noise, no dirt, you didn't take an elevator out of service. How on earth did you do it? We didn't do it. We just changed their expectation. Then he raised the rents and they were happy to pay it because they thought he was a very responsive landlord. So, if you just check, make sure your tie's straight or something like that, we've distracted you. So expectations are a big part of dissatisfaction. But what's even more fun, one day I got a phone call from a guy in the Defense Department. And he said, we really hate DuPont. Well, that's not really very nice. I worked for them for 30 years. They treated me pretty well. What's your issue? And they said, we've been after them for years now to increase the melting point of nylon by just 400 degrees. Because when our soldiers are out in the battlefield and an IED goes off, not only do they get injured by the explosion, but the fireball melts the nylon of their uniforms, and the lucky ones die, the unlucky ones suffer incredible agony for years. Okay? But somebody at DuPont named Newton keeps saying, we can't do this. You can't raise the melting point of nylon. I thought the guy was kidding at first, but he was serious. He'd never heard of Isaac Newton and had no idea there was laws of thermodynamics. He was saying this is impossible. So we've come up with a solution. This little fabric over here took all of 3 days to make. This is good to 2,000 degrees, and it's as light as silk. It does everything they want and more. The technology for doing this has been around for over 50 years, but no one ever posed the problem with the right juxtaposition of commercial motivation, opportunity, and technology. Well, my wife understands me very well, and she gave me the following challenge. She said, for every totally new application you come up for this, I will buy you a case of any first growth Bordeaux you want. Well, that was a great challenge as far as I was concerned. We ignored the fact that I was going to wind up paying for the wine, she was going to drink it. It was still a good motivator. So we have a whole bunch of different businesses now that this is being used for. For example, if you put this underneath cedar-shaped roofing, in case of a forest fire, we've got the burning embers that are carried by the air, land on your roof, and your house burns from the top down. That doesn't happen any longer. One of the big insurance companies has just cut the homeowner's premium by 20% for anybody who put this under their cedar-shaped roofing. Well, who knows? There's all kinds of things that you'll find out there. Just look at what you're unhappy with, try to generalize the problem, see if it's a bigger unhappiness and you're just looking at your piece of it, then try to make it more specific and go back and forth a couple of times. Then, and this is probably the most critical part of it, break down what any acceptable solution would have to contain. The way we teach innovation right now is identify a problem, figure out a solution, and work backwards. How do I get to there from here? That presupposes that the very first idea you get for a solution is always the best. I've never had my first idea be the best. So we've evolved this process over a number of years, and I find that very often we're solving a problem that's totally different than what we originally intended to, but the original problem is just a subset of it. What are our characteristics of innovation? It requires creativity, but I hate to use the word creativity because people lump that together with being able to write good music or do great painting. It's a lot more than that. It's identifying what the situation is that needs to be addressed and finding a way to do it. There are all kinds of things that you can change to be innovative. Sometimes you want to fool the other person. Look at all of the things you buy in the grocery store. What is it? In spite of inflation, we're holding our prices. But you don't notice the quantity of containers gone down. But you've got the customers thinking. Or the concentrated soaps. Add your own water. Well, they're saving a lot of money by doing that. Still produce exactly the same soap for washing your laundry. But you're paying more now because you're being ecologically friendly. In fact, you're not. It still is the same thing when it goes down the drain. But they're saving money. All they're doing is changing dimensions. Change quantities. That can sometimes make a wonderful difference. You change the order in which you do things. There's a great example of one on changing the form. There was a competition between Moscow State University and Lawrence Livermore Laboratories to see who could drill the smallest hole in a piece of rubber. And the folks at LBL were really proud of themselves because they were able to drill, well, the drill bit, you can't use a laser, it's cheating, a hole that was 100th of an inch in diameter. And I still don't know exactly how they did that, because even with a 16th inch drill bit, it's always snapping off the rubber. Well, they sent their sample over to Moscow State, came back about 2 weeks later with a hole 1,000th of an inch in diameter. And finally, the scientists over there admitted what they did. They froze the rubber. There was no rule that said they couldn't. When you freeze it, it doesn't have movement, so you weren't having friction, so it didn't break the drill bit. Sometimes something as simple as that will fundamentally change the world. Look at the Forbidden City in China. Some of the stones that were quarried for that were quarried over 1,000 miles away and weighed 50 to 100 tons. How did they move them 5,000 years ago? They waited till winter, they poured water on the roads, it froze, and moving stuff across ice was a whole lot easier than moving across dirt. Sometimes you have social or other norms that you have to overcome. For example, old traditional Ayurvedic medicine in India is sterilized cow urine. Now, to the Western cultures, you've got to be kidding me. Well, there's been some very good chemistry lately, which has discovered that there are some very dilute polypeptides in there, which are quite effective at treating a variety of bacteria, which you will find in the intestinal tract. Why did that come to be? Well, cows have 4 stomachs, and they process food in stomach number 1, and if there's something there that keeps the food from getting processed when it goes on stomach 2, it's not ready. And so cows evolved the generation of this protein over a long period of time so they could function more effectively. It's not that there's some giant puppeteer up in the sky who is saying, well, I'm going to do something that's unexpected and have to get it from cows. There's a reason for it. Some we know the reason for, some we don't. The most effective treatment for breast cancer right now is a chemical called tamoxifen, which is extracted from the bark of the yew tree. Nobody's figured out why that evolved in the tree, but it did, and it's saving countless thousands of lives a year. Sometimes you have to flip the problem on its head. In the early 1980s, there were 2 physicians who were doing autopsies on animals which had died but had had very bad cases of ulcers. Until I was middle-aged, if you had stomach ulcers, you were sentenced to a bland diet of graham cracker, mush, and milk, and nothing more exciting than that for the rest of your life. To me, who was addicted to hot peppers, that would have been worse than death. Well, what the doctors noticed was in the intestinal tract of these rats was a bacterium, Helicobacter pylorus. How are the ulcers causing this? It took them about 15 years to piece everything together, but it's not that the bacteria were caused by the ulcers, it's the reverse. They were causing the ulcers. So now you don't hear anybody who's got a big problem with stomach ulcers. You take a little purple pill or whatever it is, and 3 or 4 days you're fine. These 2 doctors won the Nobel Prize in medicine for just asking why. They were curious, how does this cause that? And it turns out it's exactly the reverse. This coffee mug technology, the Air Force is trying that out now. When pilots are on long missions, they get a little drowsy, and an 18-hour flight when you're in a single-seat plane gets a little tedious. So they're adding some psychovigilance software now to see how alert that you are. And if it turns out that you're getting a little woozy, it just puts a puff of air into this coffee mug and it blows coffee vapor in the oxygen system and wakes you up. The neat thing is, studies have shown that it's not the caffeine that wakes you up. It's just the aroma of coffee counteracts most of the ill effects of sleep deprivation. And this study was done on some white rats, actually sacrificed the rats and looked at the change in brain proteins as a function of smelling coffee went on. I know if somebody's brewing coffee down in the kitchen, even though our bedroom's up on the 2nd floor, that will wake me up. So really our olfactory system interacts with the brain in ways we never thought about. So just look around and watch and see what you'll find that you weren't expecting. So that's where most of the innovation will come from. There are all kinds of innovations. Some of them are are good, some of them are not so good. Financial innovations, I'm sure Wall Street doesn't deserve any thank you notes for some of the financial innovations that they've come up with lately. Certainly destroyed the economy. But the flip side is look at the recommendations that Amazon makes on their website. If you bought this, you might be interested in that. I've gotten so many books because they knew enough about what I was reading to make good suggestions. So there's a whole range of possibilities here. Then there's the social innovations. My kids are addicted to Facebook and Twitter. I don't think they're capable anymore of face-to-face conversation. Everything is text messaging. Now, yeah, there's some advantages to that, but it's biasing the world in a direction which I don't think is very appropriate. And I really have major problem with Michael Zuckerberg and Facebook because as a parent, I've tried teaching my kids from day one to look around, decide what's suspicious, what's safe, what is not. Facebook says everyone is your friend until proven otherwise. So they've turned the whole model that we as parents have tried raising our kids on upside down. There's a classic cartoon from New Yorker. It shows a dog in front of the terminal. And the captain says, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Look at all the problems we have in society today because you've got criminals who are masquerading as almost anything on the internet. You think you're talking to another 17-year-old girl who shares the same interest? It might be a 55-year-old guy who's got something nefarious in mind. Things like Twitter. There's been a massive increase in domestic crime correlated with the use of Twitter. One of my favorites is there was a young couple that tweeted to everybody in the world practically. They were going out to a new restaurant that night for dinner. When they come home, their apartment has been burglarized. To make a long story short, it was one of their very good friends who did it. He knew they weren't going to be home. They had a new computer that they had talked about on Twitter. Hey, this is a great new chance. What they'd forgotten to twit was that they had also put a new video camera in there. It was still on the old machine. So as their friend comes in stealing, he's caught on the camera. So he's in jail. But we're changing the whole world. We're telling people far more than they need to know. We're having to be much more suspicious than we were before. We're losing privacy. A lot of the issues that helped us get where we are today, we're giving back in the mania for social innovation. There's a time and a place for it, but it's not everywhere. Schools are rushing headlong to try to do all their educational materials on iPad. And yes, they can make the argument that it's cheaper and the kids don't have to carry around 40-pound backpacks with all the books in them. But some other experiments have shown that kids don't focus nearly as well if it's on the same device that they've been playing Angry Birds with on the way to school in the morning. So how do you set an appropriate context for learning if it's on a toy? Nobody would try to say you can teach science on an Xbox 360, but we're sending our students a very mixed message. But lest you think that I'm a techno-Luddite, I'm not. There is some beautiful work that was done at UCLA where they showed if you change the font that material is presented in, the child's reading rate slows down, but their comprehension and retention goes up very markedly. The reason is you're starting to interfere with or change the eye-brain pathway, which they have grown up using. So when you slow that down, their brain kicks in more, and they learn better. We're in the process of trying to design a test right now that will help you figure out exactly what is the right font for the learning style of each child. And we've got Adobe involved now, and they put capabilities into Acrobat, so we'll be able to dynamically change a document to be whatever is the optimal format for a child to read. If we can pull this off, that could have an amazing effect. Then we're personalizing the educational materials for the students. So time for just a quick mental break. What is unique about the stamps, postage stamps in Great Britain? Anybody notice? You've all undoubtedly gotten mailings with them on there. It's the only country in the world that doesn't have their name on the stamp. There's no words there. It's just pictures of queens and things like that. It doesn't say Great Britain or any words at all. The point is, just look around you. Try to match what you see into something that's different. Why is this so? Oh, I won't kid you, but I noticed, and I've been a stamp collector for many years before somebody pointed it out to me. But there are many things that we just take for granted. A question which I commonly give students is, you've just gone to the casinos in Atlantic City. You've flipped a coin 20 times. Came up heads 20 straight times. What's the next flip going to be? About 45% of the respondees say, if you're on a roll, the next flip's going to be heads as well. Another 45 say, you've had too many heads, it's going to be tails. Only 10% say, it doesn't matter. Every event is 50-50. We are very good at logically defending what we've done before. So somehow that makes it right. We change the way we think about things. It's very easy to get confused by what you see and think that there's a causality there. For example, it's been observed that 93% of all the people who die of lung cancer have nicotine stains between their fingers. NIH received a proposal one day for funding generous soap to wash the nicotine off of people's hands, and that will prevent cancer. And not quite. That's correlation. In the UK, there was a study that was done that looked at the marriage rate in medium-sized cities and compared it with the amount of grain that was destroyed by rodents in the farms surrounding the communities. And what they found is the lower the marriage rate, the less grain was destroyed by rodents. And you can scratch your head on that one for quite a while. I wouldn't have figured it out either. In the UK, a much higher percentage of pets are cats than dogs. Single people have a much larger, on average, percentage of pets than married couples. So single people would have cats, and cats would go out at night and they would catch the rodents, and therefore the rodents went there to destroy the grain. So the correlation is not all obvious, even though it's actually there. There was a great study that was done, looked at the morality of undergraduate women as a function of how they answered some questions on a Ford Foundation questionnaire. And Professor Gullickson did the detailed statistics and found an R-squared of 0.93 between the value of the buildings on campus and the morality of women. And he jumped through all kinds of hoops trying to rationalize that when you're in closer physical proximity, there was more peer pressure for moral or appropriate behavior. Wrong. There was a bias in the data, which he discovered only after the paper was accepted for publication. All the low building value campuses were Catholic women's colleges, and all the big ones were state schools like University of Alabama. You take out that parameter, the best correlation was with your parental education, and the R-squared was about 0.6. I ran an exercise at one big company a year and something ago, and I asked one of the participants to explain about innovation he had tried to get through the company and what had happened. And he said, I tried my best and they wouldn't listen. So with no warning, we turned the classroom into a courtroom, and we charged that student with a subversive innovation. The details of the charge were that he had taken company time and company resources to work on a problem that he thought was important with no management approval, and he was not spending that time working on what the company wanted. Other students were quickly co-opted to be CEO, HR manager, judge, jury. I thought that this exercise would take about 30 minutes. I just wanted to get people to understand that just because you want to innovate doesn't necessarily mean you should just go do it in a headlong rush. After 3.5 hours, everybody was getting sort of cranky and hungry because this was an course. But I had 4 senior executives from the company sitting in on this, and they came up to me afterwards and said, "We've learned more in this afternoon about dealing with innovators than we had in the previous 25 years." What made this different was there was no hierarchy of communication. The students all knew that when class was over, they were going to go out for beers together. They didn't have to worry. "Well, I can't say this because that's the CEO. I'll get fired." So a real important take-home lesson is just talk openly. I'll give you an example of why that's just so critical. One day with my Gordon students, they came in and said, "Well, we got a bunch of things we have to do today. 30 minutes, I want you to figure out a way to get man to the moon for $1 or less. I want you to eliminate all pollution in the United States in 30 days. I want you to raise $10 billion by lunchtime tomorrow. And oh, by the way, I want you to get rid of the Rocky Mountains completely." Well, they looked at me like I'd been smoking something I hadn't gotten at the corner drugstore. And were madly scribbling away on the paper, turned them in. And I didn't even read what they wrote. I tore it up, threw it in the trash. You all failed. And, Wharton students don't like to be told they failed. The criteria for getting in my course, you had to have at least a 3.85 GPA. So the word failure wasn't even in their vocabulary. But here's what the problem was. Not one of you asked a single question. You assumed because I was in a position of authority that I knew exactly what had to be done. I had itemized all the different ways of doing it, evaluated each of them, and your only responsibility is to be a loyal old soldier and go do exactly what I tell you. And that's not what we're trying to teach you here at the school. Finally, one of the girls in class raises her hand very timidly. She says, I have to ask this. Why do you want to get rid of the Rocky Mountains? It'll take hundreds of years, it'll cost trillions of dollars. Where are you going to put the rocks? You'll mess up our weather patterns. You'll destroy tourism. What's the big deal? Well, I'm thinking about building a vacation home in Colorado, and I'd really like to have a view of the Pacific Ocean from there, and the mountains are in the way. So Blackman says, well, if that's all you want, so that is a phrase I would love for you to come away with, starting to use in every part of your life. Make sure you understand what do they really want. Because once we realized that that's all I wanted, she said, don't put in a window, put in a webcam, it'll cost you $29. So $29 is a lot better than the 100 trillion in 300 years. And teaching the children that you encounter on a regular basis to respectfully ask questions like, why do you want this? What's it going to do? This is extremely important. They have to learn to question things. If you think about humans as a species, there have been hundreds of thousands, millions of innovations over the last couple of thousand years. So there's two possibilities. Either little green men from Mars came down and did them for all of us, or we are intrinsically an innovative species. I've gotten into a fight with the Chomskyians who claim that language, that we're pre-wired for language. In fact, we're pre-wired for innovation. And language is just one innovation we've had to develop for reasons of procreation, safety, food, and all that. There's a wonderful professor named Alison Gopnik who has been studying how children play and has shown that up until about age 3 or 4, children's play is identical around the world. It's only when we start teaching them that we begin to change their play styles. It sort of suggests that biologically we're all pretty much the same, and if we challenge kids' brains, we can move them along a lot more quickly than we thought. Another study showed that in a household where the parents are illiterate, by the time a child gets to kindergarten, they've heard approximately 3 million fewer words and a much narrower range of subjects. There are a number of foundations now which are giving books on DVD to disadvantaged kids. We're helping them to catch up so when they start school, they can learn more quickly and more effectively. Children are so much more capable of being innovative than we give them credit for. One of my favorite exercises is I ask my students to try to figure out how to speed up the game of golf. They quickly come to the conclusion that hunting for lost golf balls is the slow step. And they're exactly right. But since normally none of them are golfers, they don't realize if your golf is so bad you lose balls, it's a social event for you, not a competitive sport. You actually welcome the respite so you can go for your big flask or talk to your buddies, whatever. The golf ball manufacturers certainly don't want you to find the balls because they don't sell as many. The country clubs, they don't want you to play more quickly because there's more wear and tear on the course. You still pay the same thing anyway, so you're saving them money by losing balls. So here's something that we thought was a big problem, and in fact, the stakeholders all didn't want the problem solved. I gave the problem to my son when he was about 7. He thinks for no more than 30 seconds. He says, well, Dad, that's simple. Girl dogs smell different than boy dogs. So take whatever it is that makes a girl dog smell the way she does, spread that on a golf ball, and bring a boy dog with you when you go out and play golf. His nose is 1,000 times more sensitive than yours, and he'll find the ball by smell. That was a more imaginative, innovative solution than any of my graduate students or any corporate executive has ever had. And he was just 7 years old at the time. We have to find better ways to encourage the children to think outside the box. Something I found very helpful is I show them Gulliver's Travels. And the first time they watch pieces of it, they just see the animated part and think, hey, that's really pretty cool. Look how big Lemuel Gulliver was with the little Putians. When they watch it again, we do it in the context of something very big and something very small, learning to interact with one another. And then we fast forward to when Gulliver is in Brobdingnag, and now he's a little one. Because children, as they're growing up, the only adults they deal with are authority figures. Their teachers, their parents. They may deal with teenagers, but it's usually dreaded older siblings. So what I found helps a lot is to bring people of other generations into the classroom, because they will approach problems very differently. There's a world-famous scientist / educator, Michio Kaku, at the City University of New York. You've probably seen him on PBS. He's a very, very photogenic media hound, but he's a very smart guy. He did a great experiment. He took about a dozen teenagers and he asked them to count to 60, approximating 1 count per second, as best they could. Then he took a dozen people of my generation and had us do the same thing. On average, the teenagers, being in the rush that they are, got to 60 in between 42 and 44 seconds. My generation took about 75 seconds. If you assume that there's a giant metronome in the sky and it's beating, let's say, every 5 seconds, and what a teenager will perceive as 1 minute, there will be between 8 and 9 major events. My generation will feel like 15 or 16 major events. That's why the older you get, you feel that the world is moving more quickly. But in fact, it's not. It's actually moving the same speed or even a little slower. To sort of line things up, you have to have a methodology base if you're going to be innovative. That can be experience, formal education, collaboration, what you see, what you feel inspired by. First thing is really take a look at what the opportunity or the problem is. Make sure you're solving the right one. It's all too easy to get hung up on. You can have your innovations fail because of cognitive biases, economics, politics, and by the way, nature gets in the way sometimes. So where does this leave us? Are humans the only innovative species on the planet? Not certain. A number of other species will teach each other by observation. In other words, you will learn by watching someone else do it. We are the only species that does formal teaching. I've never seen a gorilla having a whole classroom of little baby gorillas and saying, okay, now we're going to go do this. So you as teachers are in a glorious situation right now to take these youngsters in their formative years and teach them the skills that will enable them to solve problems we cannot even think of right now. Think about global warming. It's going to take a whole new class of solutions for that. Many things in our world will have to change. I'm glad I'm so old that I won't be around to watch a lot of this happen. If you look at the play that children use versus the play that animals do. I watch my puppies, they're always scrapping and tussling with one another. And so they're just learning play skills. Kids' play is different. In fact, kids' play is not different. Kids are doing the what if, make believe, pretend. Those are the skills that they're intrinsically wired with that they must hone if they're going to be a successful species on this planet. Think about the Wizard of Oz, how the Lion, the Tin Man, and the Straw Man all lamented that they didn't have certain skills and characteristics. But while they were helping Dorothy get to the Emerald City, they demonstrated that they had them. So the wizard gives them placebo and gives them permissions. Now you have a heart, now you have a brain. Part of the whole educational mission is to give students of any age permission to be what they're already capable of being. Part of the problem is that we've bifurcated the world into success or failure. There's really a third state, that is you did not succeed. You've done everything well and properly, but factors you had no control over kept you from succeeding. We must learn to reward the effort and not penalize it, which is what happens. So can we teach innovation? No, we can't teach it, but we can teach the rules for applying it. We can teach the courage. We can teach the processes. But everyone is already intrinsically innovative. What you as teachers are uniquely positioned to do is give them permission to do it, give them the rewards and the encouragement. And you will be amazed at what these kids can do that we never thought they could do. I'm constantly amazed by my kids and what they've come up with. So I salute all of you who are teachers. You hold our future in your hands. You have our kids. What they will be and what our world will be is a reflection of your commitment, your dedication,